Good evening. In this presentation, I'll be going over the edTPA and the various components of this assessment and resources and tips that you can use in order to be successful. edTPA is a performance-based assessment that teacher candidates need to complete at NC State, but it's not just an NC State requirement. This is a nationwide assessment that is required in at least 41 states in the U.S. It consists of 3 tasks. Task 1 is planning, 2 is instruction, and 3 is assessment. You'll notice that this reflects the phases of a typical cycle of instruction. So, though it requires a great deal of time and effort, do realize that this is reflective of what you would be doing in the teaching field. And there are a lot of great resources that will help you succeed. Even though edTPA can seem very daunting when you first approach it, there are some things to remember that will keep you motivated. This is an assessment that is, although it's not like a typical assessment, it's not a multiple choice test, it's not even an essay. This is a very effective way for us to be assessed in order to see how well we would be doing in the classroom once we are placed into a school. We're asked to look at some of the things we've learned in our courses, such as creating student-centered classroom environments, creating collaboration in the classroom, and a respectful environment. And we're able to see how well we would be able to implement those. Once we've tried it out, we get feedback from it, from the scorers, and then we can see, that's just how well I do in the classroom. All right. Not only is it helpful for us as instructors, but it's our duty as public instructors to adhere to professional standards. This cycle of instruction that we're being assessed on ties very closely to the professional teaching standards. We're going to be able to connect these concepts and apply them in a real world context, in an actual classroom. We'll be able to see how well we can apply and execute everything we've learned in our graduate classes. So you may wonder, where do I start? Before you begin getting placed into your student teaching, go ahead and just become familiar with what edTPA is. Once you are aware that edTPA is something you're going to have to complete, you should download the edTPA handbook and start reviewing it and listening to some instruction commentaries that are available online for edTPA. Then you should start thinking about how you're going to organize yourself. Think about when you'll be student teaching. Think about when you would be able to practically work on this. You might have to space it out. Some of you may have to space it out a lot more than others because of your personal schedules. But it is something that is going to require a lot of time, so you should consider how you're going to organize yourself. Once you know that you're about to begin student teaching and you get placed into a school, talk to your cooperating teacher as soon as you can. The cooperating teacher is the one that's going to be teaching the class with you, the one that is being paid to teach the class. And so that person will be able to help you out with filling out the context for learning document, and I'll go over that when I go over task 1. But also, even though the teacher may not have completed edTPA themselves, they know what student teaching is, and they'll be able to give you advice for how to effectively carry out what you need to do once you explain it to them. So, even though you'll be working with a coordinating teacher, once you get to your portion where you're teaching, you get to implement your own lessons. It is beneficial if you make lessons that are somewhat aligned to what the students are already doing, but you get the freedom to instruct them the way that you feel is best according to what you've learned in your program. You get to be the one that's in the center teaching, and you get to be the one that assesses those students. So this is a really exciting time for teaching candidates. You get a chance to demonstrate what you have learned, your work, your teaching. edTPA is an effective assessment that is designed to help students succeed. edTPA steps are very clearly laid out in the handbook. They tell you exactly what they want. And they even have a full 15 rubrics. 15 rubrics seems like a lot, but basically the reason it's broken down so much is that so that you can see each specific thing that they want to look for. And it's divided into the three phases of the edTPA. So they have 5 rubrics for planning, 5 rubrics for instruction, and 5 rubrics for assessment. And you'll see here that even looking at the contents from the handbook, it's very thorough and goes over many different items in just a small snippet from the handbook's table of contents. Task 1 for edTPA is planning, as I mentioned before. In the beginning of this task, you'll be filling out a context for learning document, which answers basic questions about the school you'll be teaching at, the type of students you have, their learning needs, so on and so forth. This will be best filled out after you've been placed, of course, and maybe even after you've met the students. You'll want to have help from your coordinating teacher on this one. And it's really at this point that you can begin planning your lessons, because although you may know what content you want to teach, you don't know the best way to teach it until you know what the students' needs are. Once you've made your lesson plans and they're aligned to standards, you're going to be writing commentary on how they are aligned to standards and how they are addressing the students' needs that you mention in the context for learning document. Each task for edTPA requires a lot of explaining, and which seems a little bit tedious, and it is, but remember that you'll be just matching it back up with what the rubrics say. If you can match that language and feel confident that you're doing what it asks, then you should be straight. In task 1, like I said, the 3 things are the context for learning document, lesson plans, and talking about your lesson plans. Task 2 is when you're actually recording yourself teaching. So this is not going to happen at the very beginning of the semester for most of you. For most of you, you're going to observe your cooperating teacher for a little bit and then start your actual student teaching. But once you start that, where you're actually in the center of the classroom teaching, I would advise that you begin recording immediately. You're not going to be submitting all of it, but the more that you record, the more you have to choose from when it comes to selecting which segments best match the rubrics. It's important to remember that when selecting portions to submit, it's not that you're trying to show a whole learning segment from beginning to end. That's not the point. You're not trying to tell a story here. You are trying to show what they want to see in the rubrics. And what they want to see is that 1, you're demonstrating a positive classroom environment. 2, students are being engaged in learning. And 3, you're including content-specific standards and you are addressing them appropriately. So, when you submit your videos, like every task for edTPA, you're going to be writing about it. So in order to write about the videos, you definitely are going to need to give timestamps to show when and where and how each part that you're giving evidence for is demonstrating that you are mastering the rubric standards that they want you to be able to master. Timestamps are very important so that the scorers don't have to search around for what you're talking about. Remember not to share the videos publicly on YouTube or Facebook. Yes, the students are filling out consent forms, but that is so that you could submit the videos to edTPA scorers, not to the public internet. Another benefit of recording all of your student teaching is that you can pick videos that show the rubric standards and also don't have embarrassing slip-ups, like maybe content mistakes or maybe a bad day for students or your part. So avoid things like that. Here is a slide that shows the different specifications for the video submissions. You'll notice that none of these require more than 20 minutes. 20 minutes is the max for many of these and you're not submitting more than 1 or 2 videos, no matter which content you're recording for. So it's not very much. Make sure that before you student teach, you look at the rubrics for task 2 so you know what they're looking for, and you make sure you're doing it in as many days as possible. Task 3 is the assessment section. Now you should have already decided how you're going to assess the students in task 1 when you're planning, but this is where you're going to be submitting the students' work, the assessment that they did themselves. You'll select 3 student samples of the assessment and make sure that one of these students has a specific learning need. You're also going to be submitting the feedback you gave those students. So, as I mentioned before, every task of the edTPA requires writing. So, the writing you'll be doing for this is analyzing the student patterns you saw as you looked at all of the assessments for your whole class. Also, for the 3 that you submit, you should talk about that feedback you gave them and how it furthers their learning and addresses their strengths and their needs. Also, you should show evidence for a student for language understanding and use. And the final thing you are going to be writing about for the assessment section is you should be able to self-reflect on how you would be able to use the assessments and the patterns you noticed in order to make decisions on how you would continue with that class if you were to continue with that class. Specifically on those 3 focus students also, and for any other individuals or groups with special needs that you indicated in your Context for Learning document in Task 1. Something that's very important to remember is that you should support your explanation in your write-ups with principles from research and or theory. You'll get a lot of ideas for this in your NC State classes, so make sure you use everything you've learned, all those readings we've been doing, use those theories and the authors if possible, and that's required in the edTPA rubrics, so don't forget it. A few final tips. As I said before, you're writing a lot. If you're an English major like I am, the temptation is to make it sound really beautiful and really eloquent, but that's not the point of what you're writing here. This is technical writing, so the language you're using should be specific but very concise. The wording should very closely, if not exactly, match what's written in the edTPA rubrics. If you do that, then you're more likely to get a high score. Also, there's a lot that's covered in this test, but only one deadline, so consider creating your own personal deadlines. Also, don't isolate yourself. We have lots of instructors in our program that are very willing to help you. NC State has a very high success rate for edTPA because we have such supportive instructors. Please utilize them. Also, review information, guidance, and tips on our NC State's edTPA website. It's updated frequently, so check it often. Finally, we have PGU sessions offered each semester. You can look at them on the edTPA's website at NC State and sign up for them there. So that's all that I have for you. I hope that your edTPA goes very well, and thank you for listening to this presentation.